question to ask, unquote. Now, as people who have studied the mystery airship question are aware, some of these stories are deeply suspect, and sometimes they involve people who don't even exist. They were just made up by somebody, probably somebody in the newspaper office. But I decided to investigate to find out if I could even establish that a J.R. Lagone, a Charlie Lagone, and a Rabbi A. Levy even existed. And I ended up engaging in correspondence with the archivist in the Beaumont Public Library system. And he provided me with the proof that the Lagones existed. They're mentioned in official records from the period, including an indication that J.R. Lagone died sometime between 1897 and the turn of the century. And his wife is listed in his widow is identified in the 1900 Beaumont City Directory. Now, there's also no question that a Rabbi A. Levy existed, and he served in Beaumont in 1897. Beaumont historian W.T. Block has written about the city's small but thriving Jewish community dating back to 1875. In September 1895, Temple Emmanuel was established, and according to Block, its members immediately engaged Dr. Aaron Levy as the city's first resident rabbi, unquote. Block notes that during a 6-year stay in Beaumont, quoting, Rabbi Levy, as the voice of the congregation, plunged headlong into community affairs. He won much acclaim. Now, I found references to Rabbi Levy in the Galveston papers of the period. For example, this sentence, Rabbi Levy has won many friends during his stay in Beaumont, unquote. In short, Levy does not look much like a hoaxer or a prankster or a teller of tall tales. And this suggests that not every account of an alleged encounter with human-like airship crew was necessarily fiction. Now, there's another related story that I also investigated involving, it appears in the press of the period, involves a man named H.C. Lagrone of Deadwood, Texas. Now, there's no question that H.C. Lagrone existed. His father, Adam Lagrone, founded a tiny town that in 1882 was named Deadwood. And the younger Lagrone established a mill around which the settlement grew. In 1885, he was the town's first postmaster. On the evening of April 28, 1897, he allegedly had this experience, reported in the Houston Post 2 days later. He heard a disturbance among his horses, and he went out to check on the cause, and he saw this strange flying object approaching from the southwest. And it landed, and this is what he wrote. I went directly to the place of landing, and on arrival found the ship. Its crew was composed of 5 men, 3 of whom entertained me while the other 2 took rubber bags and went for a supply of water at the well. They informed me that this was one of 5 ships that had been traveling the country, and that this individual ship was the same one as recently landed near Beaumont. After having traveled pretty well around the northwest, they stated that the ships were put up in an interior town in Illinois. They were rather reticent about giving out information since they had not yet secured everything by patent, but stated they would soon be secure in this. Now, there were no airshipologists in 1897 to interview these witnesses firsthand and investigate the cases. But to the extent that we can read the evidence from limited, if suggestive evidence, it's surely reasonable to infer that these were credible informants telling incredible stories. In other words, pretty much like many, many millions of people over the centuries. It appears to be possible to encounter things that don't exist in any conventional understanding of the verb. I call these things experience anomalies, or the secondary phenomenon as opposed to the core phenomenon. They typically have a parasitic or even parody-like relationship to a core anomalous event. The anomalous event takes place in the world and can be empirically demonstrated or potentially demonstrated. Its experiential correlate borrows its imagery from the anomalous event, but is otherwise unrelated to it. Experience anomalies are open-ended. Almost anything can be seen, though cultural traditions and expectations play a large, in some ways, determining role. in shaping their particular content. In experience, individuals perceive supernatural or at least unlikely entities like fairies, mer beings, angels, the Virgin Mary, gods, monsters, space people, and phantom airship crews. Now, these are not hallucinations as hallucinations are ordinarily understood. These encounters, which sometimes occur collectively, are truly profoundly mysterious, and their cause is unknown. Yet to all available evidence, sincere witnesses in good viewing conditions that assure us of the anomalousness of the observation don't translate into anything that transcends memory and testimony. We barely have a vocabulary to talk about these things. The closest we get to it is visionary experience, and visionary experience is used as if it's an explanation when in fact it's only a description. The British ufologist Jenny Randles calls this the Oz factor, defining it as the sensation sometimes reported by UFO witnesses of, quote, being transported temporarily from our world into another where reality is but slightly different, unquote. Now, protean in nature, experience anomalies are variable, changing over time and geography. In transitional historical and cultural periods, they may fuse motifs in curious ways. Here's one dramatic instance of that I found in a 1907 Tennessee newspaper. And it supposedly took place in June 1907. It involves a hunter named Walter Stevenson. Stevenson was resting from a hunt out in a rural area, sitting on a log, and he noticed something in the eastern sky, and at first he thought it was a kite. It was approaching him. As it got closer, it revealed itself to be, as the press account calls it, a huge balloon of a pattern he had never in his life before seen, unquote. And beautiful, eerie music was emanating from this object. It landed, and strange people with their faces covered stepped out of the car, and as the paper put it, the car was closely curtained with a substance that fairly glistened, unquote. They walked to a nearby spring and knelt down as if in worship. Stevenson approached them after their worship ritual was over, and he asked them who they were. And one of the crew members pulled the veil off the face, revealing the face of a lady, a benign face of a lady, he called it. And she asked him in German if he had prayed. And the press account goes on, quoting, instantly all were aboard, the airship rose and was gone in a westerly direction. Mr. Stevenson states that the incident left an impression upon him that he can never forget. And while he knows that it was some human invention, it looked and the music sounded more like that of angels than of mortals, unquote. Now, if experience anomalies adapt themselves to a culture's idea of supernatural or otherwise fantastic sightings, this one conjures up divine entities, angels, and even by one reading, the Blessed Virgin Mary, secret airship pilots, and looking forward to UFOs in the modern sense. Notions of extraordinary encounters, on the other hand, in some instances may also have as their inspiration the sorts of real, this-world encounters whose contents are sufficiently exotic and enigmatic as to border on the fantastical. Now, ball lightning is poorly understood, but very few people dispute its existence anymore. But it has its correlates in the liminal zone of experience anomaly. Sociologist James McLennan has noted that, quoting, an effect that occurred during an electrical storm would be termed ball lightning. Other cases with the exact same appearance but occurring in other circumstances would be called UFOs, psychic lights, or will-o'-the-wisps, unquote. Now, in such context, balls of light may act purposefully, as if endowed with intelligence, and able to perform fantastic feats such as the opening of and passing through a locked window, according to one of McLennan's informants. Now, where do we go from here? I think what's required is a radically objective approach that respects the testimony that deserves respect. In other words, from people who are sane and sincere, even when it speaks of incredible things. This testimony may or may not tell us fantastic truths about the world, but it does tell us something